The humility of Jesus. I am meek and lowly in heart. Matthew 11:29. Let's start with a wonderful verse from the book of Matthew in the Bible. It says, "Come to me, all of you who work hard and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my teachings and learn from me, because I am gentle and humble in spirit, and you will find rest for your souls." This verse is different from the others in the Bible because it's like a personal story. Jesus, the person speaking, talks about himself and his humble nature. It's unique because he usually lets others talk about his good qualities, but here he is describing his own humility. Some people have been surprised by this and even doubted that Jesus really said it. They think it's not like him or that it shows a flaw in his character. They say that a person should never praise themselves. It's not proper. But let's think about this. Is it okay for someone to describe themselves? Is it right for someone to explain why others should come to them for guidance? I believe it is. That's all Jesus is doing here. He's saying, "Come to me. I have something important to teach you. I want to teach you about humility." Humility is a virtue that is often misunderstood. It's been wrongly defined and misrepresented. What does humility really mean? If we asked people in ancient Athens, they would have said that humility is weak, cowardly, and submissive. They would have seen it as a characteristic of slaves. If one Greek called another Greek humble, it would have been an insult. In the non-Christian world, humility was never seen as a virtue. It was always seen as a defect or a vice. But what does humility mean? It's not an easy question to answer. Humility is considered a Christian virtue, but defining it is challenging. We know that Jesus was humble, and he expects humility from us too. He took the word humility and gave it a positive meaning. However, when we try to define it, we get different answers. Some say it means having a low opinion of oneself. Others say it means making oneself small, feeling inferior in front of others, or acknowledging imperfections and faults. Some even say it means being soft, passive, and submissive. But all of these definitions are wrong when we look at the New Testament. The humility Jesus wants from his followers is the same humility he had himself. It's not about being weak or submissive. Jesus was confident and had a strong spirit. He never underestimated himself. In fact, he saw himself as greater than Moses and made bold statements about his role and authority. So when Jesus talks about being meek and lowly in heart, humility doesn't mean thinking less of oneself. To truly understand what he means, we need to get closer to him and his teachings. Jesus taught his disciples 3 important lessons about humility, and I want to focus on these lessons. The first lesson can be found in the 18th chapter of Matthew in the first 5 verses. During a specific event, Jesus took a little child and placed them in the center, saying, "Those who humble themselves like this child will be great in the kingdom of heaven." If you don't become humble like a child, you won't be able to enter the kingdom of heaven. We have heard these words so often that they no longer surprise us. However, this scene is truly remarkable and unique in history. No other civilization, like Assyria, Babylonia, Egypt, Persia, Greece, or Rome, has ever witnessed something like this. It is completely original. To humble oneself like a child means to be teachable, obedient, and willing to learn. A child is always curious and constantly asks questions. They want to understand everything and have a thirst for knowledge. This eagerness to learn is what makes a child humble. A child is not arrogant or vain. They don't care about expensive possessions, fancy clothes, or social status. They can play happily with another child from a humble background. They choose their loved ones based on genuine affection, not social status. Jesus loves this childlike quality. He criticized and condemned the Pharisees because they lacked this humility. They were not teachable and thought they knew everything. They were vain, seeking attention for their accomplishments. They loved being respected and desired social status. Jesus couldn't reach them because they lacked humility. On the other hand, Jesus had a humble heart like a child. Although the Bible doesn't tell us much about his early years, we can imagine him sitting at his mother's feet, eager to learn from her. We can picture him in the small school in Nazareth, hungry for knowledge. We catch a glimpse of him at the age of 12, so thirsty for knowledge that he stayed in the temple, asking the teachers more questions. He was always eager to learn. He had no arrogance or assumptions. He constantly spoke to God, asking him questions and seeking guidance. He couldn't live without prayer. Prayer is the language of humility. Only those with a humble heart can truly pray. When we say that Jesus was a man of prayer, we mean that he was meek and humble. Now let's turn our attention to the 20th chapter of Matthew, specifically verses 25 to 28. Despite Jesus' warnings and teachings, his disciples are filled with ambition. They all desire to be first, to be in positions of power. 2 of them even ask Jesus for the highest positions in his kingdom. However, Jesus tells them that he cannot grant their request. When the other 10 disciples hear about this, they become angry because they too wanted those positions. Jesus gathers all 12 disciples and says, "You know that rulers of other nations exercise authority over their people, and those who are considered great exercise power over them. But it should not be this way among you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be the leader must be your servant." Here, we see the importance of humility. It involves not only being teachable and free from vanity and ambition, but also a willingness to serve others. A humble person is ready to be useful and help their fellow brethren. Jesus emphasizes this by saying, "Come to me, for I am meek and humble in heart. Whoever wants to be the leader among you must be your servant, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." This perfectly illustrates his life's purpose. As one of the inspired apostles put it, he went about doing good. He never looked down on others or acted superior. He humbled himself in order to help those in need. Humility means not underestimating one's abilities or feeling unworthy, but rather coming down to the level of others to do good. This is what true Christian humility is about. The third lesson in humility was taught to his disciples on the night of his betrayal in the upper room. You can read about it in the 13th chapter of the Gospel according to John. The disciples still had the desire for power and had not yet understood the joy of serving others. They were upset because they didn't get the positions they wanted. To prevent the feast from continuing, Jesus gets up from the table, takes a basin, and wraps a towel around himself. He proceeds to wash the dust off the disciples' feet. Knowing that the disciples didn't fully understand, Jesus explains the meaning behind his actions. He tells them that just as he humbled himself to serve them, they too must be willing to serve one another. This incident highlights what true humility is. It means setting aside one's own dignity, not caring about one's reputation, and delighting in serving others. And why was Jesus able to do this? John explains it with the profound words, knowing that he came from God and was going back to God. It wasn't because he had a low opinion of himself or wanted to diminish his worth. It was because he knew his divine origin and destiny, and he was aware of his exalted position, that he was willing to take on the role of a servant. This is the secret to humility, regardless of time or place. A person can only be humble by drawing close to God. It is by focusing on the eternal that one becomes willing to do things that may be difficult or seem impossible. It is because we forget that we come from God and will return to Him that we become obsessed with our own importance, value our reputation, and act haughty and superior. Only someone who is certain of God possesses the true secret of humility. Christian humility is far different from the false humility that we often encounter. Much of what the world calls humility is not true humility at all. It is a deceitful combination of vanity and falsehood. When people say they don't amount to anything or can't do anything, they are not being honest. They know they are not telling the truth, but they are masking their egotism with false humility. There is no greater form of vanity than the one that pretends to be humble. The humility that Jesus desires and exemplifies in his own life is a form of strength. Only a strong person can truly be humble. It involves willingly giving up one's rights, refusing to exercise power, and being ready to lower oneself and not seek recognition. Jesus always relinquished his rights and rejected the use of his power. He had numerous opportunities to seek revenge on his enemies, but his humility prevented him from doing so. Even when his enemies mocked him on the cross, saying, "Let him save himself," he chose not to because of his humility. Instead, he embraced humility and willingly sacrificed himself. As a result, God exalted him and gave him a name that commands the respect of all. Every knee will bow, and every tongue will confess that Jesus is the Lord.